event, the Strait Talk Symposium. Now, this is something that we at the Center for the Pacific Rim love to see happen. It is initiated and organized by students. They come up with this wonderful idea of fostering cross-strait talks involving student delegates from the mainland, China, Taiwan, and student organizations across the United States. So we're very much looking forward to this very meaningful event, and I'd especially like to thank our co-sponsors, our sponsors, the Japan Policy Research Institute, Professor Chiho Sawada. The Research Institute is a very important arm of the Center for the Pacific Rim, which seeks to bridge the Pacific for fostering understanding across nations and peoples in the Pacific Rim. I'd also like to thank the Institute for East Asian Studies and the Strait Talk chapter at the University of California. Sorry, we'd love to incorporate it, but it's the University of California at Berkeley. All right, so without further ado, let me introduce Professor Chiho Sawada, who has been actively engaged with the Strait Talk Symposium, Director of the Japan Policy Research Institute. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just up here to let you... Oh. Thank you. I'm just up here to let you know what will happen over the next 10 or 15 minutes so you're not taken by surprise or get anxious. So what we have tonight is not only a wonderful lecture, but an opening ceremony for the 2011 Bay Area Strait Talk Peace Builders Symposium. So what we'll have in the following few minutes is I'll ask the Strait Talk delegates who have traveled from afar, some from China, others from Taiwan, and from across the United States, and this year we even have a European delegate. So the diagram's not exactly accurate. There should perhaps be another bridge in the European continent. But we'll ask our Strait Talk delegates to introduce themselves, mention their institutional affiliation, and also our lead Strait Talk interactive conflict resolution trainer to introduce himself as well. Please hold your applause until everyone has finished. And then after that, we have the additional treat of having Professor Tom Gold, Professor of Sociology at University of California, Berkeley, tell us a little bit about the history and mission of the Strait Talk organization, which has grown and grown in 5 short years. And finally, I'll run back up and do my best to introduce our distinguished speaker for the evening, Professor Daniel Lynch of USC. So now, I hope that was clear. I'll turn, well, do we need the mic for the introductions? Now we'll have Professor Tom Gold on history.
Can I hide behind the podium here so I can put, I have some notes. Well, I'd also like to add my welcome to all of the delegates and to everyone else who is here this evening. I wanted to tell you a little bit about Strait Talk. Strait Talk was begun in 2005 by a 19-year-old undergraduate at Brown University named Johnny Lin, who himself was born in Taiwan and grew up in Los Angeles. I met him at a program similar to this. And then he came and visited Berkeley in 2005 and discussed with me the idea, it seemed like a wild idea at the time, of having a program where he would bring together young people from Taiwan, from the US, and from mainland China to engage in, if you have more than 2 people, is it a dialogue? I don't know what a trilogue, where people would discuss just quite honestly and openly, discuss issues on their mind and how they might resolve some of the, in particular, the burning issues in cross-strait relations. 2005 was a very tense period in cross-strait relations. It was an enormously gutsy and possibly far-fetched thing, especially for a 19-year-old to engage in. But he pulled it off successfully in 2005, and since then there has been a Strait Talk program, a Strait Talk Symposium every year at Brown in the fall. And I was privileged to attend in 2006 and in 2007. And I'm just extraordinarily impressed at how successful it has become, and it has taken on a life of its own. About 3 years ago, some undergraduates let me back up a little bit. I was so impressed by the undergraduates at Brown that I came back to Berkeley, where I was teaching a course, I think in the fall of 2007, spring of 2007, on Chinese society. And I was very distressed that no one at Berkeley, no one on the West Coast was taking the initiative to create a program similar to Straight Talk. So the first thing I did was to get one of my students up to apply, and he was the first sort of non-East Coast delegate to participate as an American delegate at Brown, and then he helped to set up Straight Talk at Berkeley. So this year is the third time. So I'm extremely humbled that now Berkeley is taking the lead in this, but I'm also very impressed. I didn't realize that the name now is no longer just Straight Talk Symposium, but is Bay Area Straight Talk Peace Builders Symposium, and the role that USF has taken as well in helping this project develop. Johnny Lin himself last year was in the Bay Area working for a nonprofit and was sitting right there, I think. This year he has a Fulbright fellowship and is in India working on issues of India-China relations. So he is committing himself very much to this mission of negotiation and peace building in particular involving China. The Straight Talk now has, over the years, there has developed now a core of people who have been through this very intense experience, and I'm glad to learn that now they are setting up something of an alumni association, which I think will be very critical going forward. Also exciting news is that Straight Talk now has expanded beyond Brown, or with the East Coast and the West Coast, and now there are Straight Talk programs in Hong Kong, and there will be one in Taiwan, and the Hong Kong one is underway as we speak, and Johnny is facilitating it. Is that right, Tots? Yeah. So Johnny has left India to go to Hong Kong to facilitate it. So it's just extraordinarily exciting to hear all of this news. 2 years ago, I was in teaching for short term in Seoul, South Korea, and I received an email from some of the Straight Talk alums who had moved to Beijing. They had graduated from Brown in 2009. They had moved to Beijing, and they said, "We are setting up a travel agency to take American young people to North Korea. Would you please publicize this among your students?" And I said, "Not only will I publicize it, can I go?" And they said, "Well, sure, we'd love it if you would go." And so in 2009, I traveled with them to North Korea. And in last year, they also took a group to North Korea, a group of young Americans, not only young people now, because word has gotten out, to North Korea. And this summer, they are planning 2 trips to North Korea. And I just received an email today from one of them who said that over the last 4 days in Beijing, they're back in Beijing, they have met with people from the North Korean embassy in Beijing who are very excited about developing more programs between North Korea and America. So I think one of the great payoffs or spin-offs of the Straight Talk procedure, the Straight Talk theory and philosophy, is now hopefully going to have some effect in dealing with North and South Korea and possibly young Americans as well. If you want more information on that, they have a bunch of different operations. But if you Googled Pyongyang Project, you can learn more about the groups that they're dealing with right now. So one of the things I think that is exciting about Straight Talk is that it attracts and supports people who believe in negotiation, who believe in the importance of talking things through, no matter how much you may disagree with somebody or think you disagree with somebody. Making the first step to engage in intensive, long-term, and a week can be a very long period of time, negotiations where you pour your heart out and you wrestle with things that you have taken for granted is extraordinarily important. It's extraordinarily difficult and extraordinarily important. And I really admire and salute all of the people from the 3 the three places who have committed themselves, who are attracted by this idea and have committed themselves to this process. I think you'll find the experience, and we have some alumni here, of the deep mental and emotional experience that you will have may be life-changing. It may fundamentally change the way that you see yourself, the way that you see your homeland, and the way that you see international relations. So I warn you that you're going to really have a very intense mental and emotional workout over the course of the next week. I think you'll realize that mainland China, Taiwan, and America are very, very complex societies. We often tend to talk about China, mainland China, or Taiwan, or the United States as if they were monoliths, but they're not. They're very complex, and all of us need to realize this and appreciate this. And one of the great things that you'll come away from this meeting with is an understanding of the complexity of the other societies you're engaging with, as well as a new appreciation of the complexity of your own society and the importance of standing in other people's shoes and trying at least to empathize, to see the world, in particular cross-strait relations, from the point of view of other people. I also think, as an elderly person who now can get senior citizen tickets at movie theaters, if I had time to go to movies, who grew up in the Cold War and was brainwashed to think about China, to think about Taiwan, to think about international relations in a particular way. It's so great to see the open-mindedness of people of the younger generation and the risks that you are willing to take for peace and the risks that you're willing to take to step out of your comfort zone and to understand a lot of these very sensitive issues from other points of view. So with that sermon, I guess it's an appropriate place to deliver a sermon, I will turn it over to Dr. Sawada. Thank you very much, and welcome to everybody.
Okay, we're almost to the lecture. Thank you very much. So as you see from this slide, Straight Talk Symposium's April 7th to 13th. So it's a week long, and during the day, the delegates engage in rigorous conflict resolution workshops, but by night, most of the evenings, there are lectures from specialists in East Asian affairs. And it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for this evening, Professor Daniel Lynch, who is the Professor of International Relations and also Director of the Politics and IR program, PhD program at University of Southern California. He's also a member of the Executive Committee of the USC, U.S.-China Institute, a member of editorial boards of the Issues and Studies Journal, Millennium Journal of International Studies. He has numerous publications, including the book Rising China and Asian Democratization, also After the Propaganda State, Media Politics and Thought Work in Reformed China, and many fascinating book chapters and articles, including Taiwan Adapts to the Network Society. And he'll be giving a lecture for us tonight. And I'd also like to thank our promotional co-sponsors, the Asia Society, Northern California, the University of San Francisco Asian Studies Program, the University of San Francisco Master of Asia Pacific Studies Program, the Taiwanese American Professionals Association, and finally, the Fromm Institute of Lifelong Learning for providing a wonderful venue for us this evening. So please join me in welcoming Professor Daniel Lynch.
Microphone on? Now it's on. Thank you very much. Thanks to the co-sponsors, to Professor Tom Gold, my old friend. Not that old friend. I don't think of you as a senior citizen at all. It's great to be here. This is a wonderful program, and I was really honored when I got the email message inviting me to come and do it. I think it's a really worthwhile venture. And I didn't realize it had been going on already for so long. It's really terrific. What I'm going to do tonight, though, is I'm going to talk straight in the other way. It's not working, actually. The PowerPoint isn't advancing now. It's not advancing, yeah. So let me try something else. It's an Italian computer. Okay. I didn't say it. That's our Italian European delegate said that. So I'm going to talk about some of my research related to the nature, thanks very much, the nature of China's posture toward the outside world, and invite everyone to think about President Ma Ying-jeou's of Taiwan's strategy for dealing with the Cross-Strait issue in this context. And I'm going to invite you to think about the real difficulties there will be achieving peace in the Taiwan Strait, at least on terms that all the actors would find acceptable. That doesn't mean I think peace is impossible, and of course it doesn't mean I think peace is a bad thing, but going into a really intense exercise like you're about to get into, I think it's important to put everything on the table and just frankly recognize all the challenges so that you don't think it's going to be something easy to do, okay? So, focus of my current research then is on what sort of foreign and security policies we should expect from China leading up to about the year 2030 or so, in the next couple of decades, as Chinese power continues to grow. You all know China's economy is growing rapidly for the last 30 years, about 9 to 10% growth. The People's Liberation Army budget has increased on average about 15% for the last 20 years. It's increasingly powerful in the cultural, diplomatic areas. So what then, looking ahead, should we expect from Chinese foreign policy, assuming in the next 2 decades, is going to be even more powerful? And there are current debates out there in the international relations field, my field, that I'd like to briefly introduce. I know not everyone has an IR background, but that's okay. I'm going to briefly introduce some core ideas in my field. I think outside of China, the dominant debates generally reject the concept of state identity as a serious factor in trying to understand any state's trajectory, any state's foreign policy. As you'll see, I'm going to try to bring identity back in when thinking about Chinese foreign policy. So we should identify that term briefly. Relatively stable, role-specific understandings and expectations about oneself, which in this case would mean really the elite, the Chinese elite. In an authoritarian society, an elite is making foreign policy, primarily, of course, with influences from society and kind of with pressures from society, but it's really an elite making foreign policy. So we want to understand how that elite identifies the nation, China, in relation to other societies in the world and in terms of social relationships, shared meanings or not shared meanings, rules, norms, and practices, analogous to individual identity in a regular society. The current debates on China's future draw mostly from 2 schools of thought in international relations, neo-realism and neoliberalism, which assume actually that all state identities are the same. This is something I'm going to be taking on. Both of these approaches hold identity constant by positing that normal states all share the common identity of a coherent, rational actor. And so that would mean that analysts only need to determine what would be in a future China's rational self-interest, and then its foreign policy could easily be predicted, allowing for chance events and so on. So if China is a rational actor like all other states are rational actors, then you just try to imagine various scenarios in the future to be able to predict Chinese foreign policy. It should be fairly easy. But there are at least 2 problems with borrowing from neorealism and neoliberalism in this way, which again, I think most students of China and its trajectory actually do. First is that the rational actor is actually an identity that's imputed to the Chinese state rather than demonstrated empirically. In other words, it's assumed by most writers on Chinese foreign policy and Chinese trajectory. I've read a lot of this stuff, and over and over, I find that it's not demonstrated to be a rational actor in the particular senses of neorealism and neoliberalism. It's assumed to be it. So, in effect, the Chinese identity is not empirically demonstrated, it's imputed by analysts to China. And then the second problem is that